So this isn't gonna be edited at all because this is more just a proof of my work. So basically, this design brief I've been trying to I had tried to follow it to the best of my ability. Obviously, with Unity, that I'm not really proficient at it, as this is the first time I'm doing anything beyond I'm relatively like this is pretty big in comparison to my other projects on Unity and in Python and coding in general. So I'm just gonna go through it. Okay. I started with my node behavior, which I think in retrospect is actually kind of foolish of me because the nodes have a lot of depth to them as I'm gonna have to be placing towers on them, and the pathfinding is way harder than I initially thought. So for the time being, all I've done is make it so that the render, when you actually render it in, they will become either null or land for now, as I'll be working the pathfinding really soon actually. Um, this is pretty basic. It's random int, and then the randomness will choose a gray and render a gray tile with the gray color. Uh, or it'll just basically show that it's not a gray tile. And I made sure to put a flag in or boolean to see if it is null or not for the pathfinding, which will be coming up later. And a later method for the nodes themselves. And I'll probably be in the level controller as well. They'll have to work together very well. So for the level controller, I just simply hang on, let me just remove some. This is for another thing. Shit. I mean, yeah. This is by the way, this is for me as much as it is for Mr. Murphy to show proof of work, as I have not recorded any of my progress over the summer. As I forgot, and I just looked at programming, and I was working on other projects as well, just to get better at Unity itself. For this, took me a while to figure it out, and I think I am very wasteful here because I don't use node array at all in this list. Not in this list, in this program, right? In fact, I can probably remove that, hopefully. Yeah, cool. For this, I've just had to use a grid resolution, which is, I initially was going to have two different, so I could make it rectangular and change the pathing a little bit, but I've decided against that and just use a square grid uh, consistently, as making a grid resolution was becoming a bit annoying, especially because later on when I have to choose point A and point B on my map or my grid, it will become more tedious to keep remembering which variables belong to what, and this will become very complicated very quickly as I build upon this. Um, as you can see, there's a transform here, which is a list full of grid coordinates, which will be used over here. And then the grid res, which I've already said is the dimensions of the grid, and then a transform, which is the node. I'll just quickly go over here, go to my level controller, and the node over here, basically, I've just placed a node prefab into this. The grid res is public so that I can see how big the grid actually is. As you'll see later, this matters. Um, and if I ran this code, which first let me just run you through it, makes a random range between 8 and 12 for now, because I don't want to keep it small for the time being before I expand out on my actual size, as I believe that this could be pretty big without it using too much CPU. I'll have to check the stats when I actually run this in a proper build. It will make this, or so the grid will be created, and I made it so that it was times 4. This is because um I want to scale this up 4 times. For now, it's not scaled 4 times. Just so that I can just so I can work with a scale 1, and then I'll change the maths to scale to 4, as I think 4 is a pretty good camera size. Of course, I don't need to do this, as and also it's good for assets, depending on if I make bigger assets or small assets. Unnecessary for now. This is just loops. This is just loops to create grid points, which is a method that I made to basically instantiate or put down the node prefab uh in these in the positions that are in this list, right? And this is like a workaround for matrices, as this would need to be a matrix otherwise. But I can just use a transform to get a grid, like to get a list of coordinates basically. And over here, this is just to get the coordinates of each of the nodes, which it just works pretty well. Like I'll use that later for other, basically when I'm having to work with towers and stacking things on top of each other, which will come later. And then this just adds I'm waffling on my words now. It's almost 11 and I forgot I needed to send something in. And this basically will just, I'm tired. Anyway, I'm just gonna run the code so you can see what happens. If I move the game into the big. So as you can see, the grid has been created and my nodes are working properly with a 10% chance of them being a null as obstacles. This is like the theory. This is the pre-made nodes that I had created. And these are the instantiated nodes, which I keep forgetting that in order to do this, I need to put the level controller in here to make the nodes go into. It doesn't matter for now. This is just to keep it kind of clean on the UI side or on my side. If I move over here, you can see, and the reason why I chose to do it one is because it's a grid of one by one, like one wide cubes or squares. And you can see that it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10, 10 by 10 nodes, and the grid res is 10. And if I was to run this again, this is actually a 9 by 9. And if you go down to the scene, you can see that it is 9 by 9. And while this does not look pretty on the grid because it's centered, it works perfectly. And I could make this so that the random is modularly divided, or was it floor divided, so that you can only get even numbers and therefore look cleaner on the grid. But this grid doesn't exist inside the game, so it doesn't actually matter that that's the case. I just have to keep in mind as a programmer that I cannot rely on these grid lines to design everything if the cubes are 9 by 9, because obviously they're not in line 100% of the time. That is all I have to say. I'm just going to end the recording here because that is what I'm going to need to basically write down later on.